Nobody talks about this painting. Not seriously, anyway. It surfaces every few months somewhere on the internet. Art history accounts, dark aesthetic pages, people who collect the strange and the unsettling, and it always gets the same two reactions. Half the comments say it's disturbing. The other half say it's beautiful. Then everyone scrolls on. I kept thinking about why that bothered me. And I think it's this. The painting is being treated like a vibe when it's actually an argument. A very specific, very deliberate argument about mythology, about grief, about what it means to be a nation that doesn't exist anymore. And almost no one reading those comment threads has any idea. So let me tell you what I actually found when I went deep on this. The painting is called Topielica. The artist is Antoni Kamieński, a Polish painter working at the turn of the 20th century. And the word in the title, Topielica, is where everything starts. Topielica is not a drowned woman. She is what a drowned woman becomes. The Polish word topielica comes from the verb topić, to drown, to submerge. The literal translation is something like drowned woman, but translation flattens it almost beyond recognition, because in Polish folklore, a topielica is not a woman who drowned and died. She is the thing that emerges after. Here is the belief, as it existed in rural Polish villages for centuries. When a young woman died in water, through suicide, through murder, through an accident born of desperation, her soul could not rest. It was trapped, bound to the water where she died. And in that trapped state, she was transformed into something malevolent. Not evil exactly, vengeful in a very specific, very earned way. She would appear at riverbanks, a young woman, beautiful, pale-skinned, sometimes calling out for help, sometimes just visible in shallow water, appearing to bathe. Men who approached her did not come back. She would pull them down, not from hatred, the folklore suggests, but from something closer to compulsion. The belief was that a topielica could only be freed from her watery prison if she caused another drowning to replace her own. Tragedy, perpetuating tragedy. Grief with nowhere to go but outward. What I find most striking about this mythology, and what I think most people who share this painting online have never stopped to consider, is where the moral weight actually sits in the story. The topielica is not the villain. She is the consequence. The original sin in almost every specific topielica legend is a man. A fiancé who abandoned her. A family that drowned her for an unwanted pregnancy. A village that looked away. The woman goes into the water because the world offered her nothing else, and then she is condemned for it. There's a story attached to a village on the Warta River. A girl, no name remembered, threw herself in after her fiancé left her. She became a topielica. The local legend says no man who encountered her on that stretch of river ever survived. But when you hear the story told properly, in the version that's been passed down, the teller always starts with the fiancé. Always. The girl's drowning is not the beginning. It is the result. That is the subject of this painting. Kamieński didn't paint a monster. He painted the moment just before one is made. The painting is done in pen and ink with what appears to be wash. Brown, murky, the color of river water that hasn't seen sunlight in a long time. The entire palette is earth and shadow. There is almost no color in the Western European sense of the word. No blue sky, no bright flesh, none of the luminous backgrounds you see in the salon painting of this era. The woman is at the center. She is nude, floating. Not on the surface, but suspended somewhere just beneath it, or perhaps at the threshold between surface and depth. Her body is turned slightly upward, her face toward whatever is above the water. Her eyes are closed. Her hair spreads out behind her, loose and uncontrolled the way hair only is in water or in sleep. She is not struggling. That is the first thing that matters. There is no expression of panic, no contortion in her limbs, no hand reaching for the surface. The stillness is total. And Kamieński renders her skin with a warmth and care that creates a strange dissonance with everything surrounding her. Because he trained under William Adolphe Bouguereau in Paris, one of the great academic painters of the human figure, a man whose entire technical project was about making skin look alive. Kamieński took that training and pointed it at a dead woman. The technique refuses to let you dismiss her. It insists on her as a person even as the painting tells you she is no longer one. Then, the octopus. I want to be exact about what is happening here because I think the instinctive reaction, discomfort, revulsion, the urge to look away, prevents most viewers from actually seeing what Kamieński painted. The octopus is not attacking her. Its tentacles are not tearing or consuming. They are wrapped around her torso and legs in a configuration that, if you remove the animal from the equation and just look at the gesture, reads as an embrace. Something is holding her. In the dark, cold water, with no human present, no mourner, no witness. Something is holding her. The creature has no face that registers emotion. It has no consciousness of what it is doing or why. It is wrapping itself around her for the same reason it would wrap itself around a rock or a piece of coral, because that is the mechanical behavior of its nature. It does not know she had a name, it does not know she was wronged, it knows nothing, and it is still the only thing in this painting that stayed. I've been sitting with that detail for weeks now, and I still don't have a clean way to describe what it does to me. The most honest I can be is this. It is the loneliest image of mourning I have ever seen in a painting. Mourning performed by something that doesn't know it's mourning for someone the world already forgot. Who was Kamieński, and why his exact biography matters? Here Antoni Kamieński was born in 1860 in the Grodno Governorate. That region is now part of Belarus. In 1860, it was part of the Russian Empire. Poland, as a country, did not exist. I need to dwell on that for a second because I think English-speaking audiences consistently underestimate what it meant to be Polish in the second half of the 19th century. The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth had been partitioned 3 times. In 1772, 1793, and 1795, divided between the Russian Empire, the Kingdom of Prussia, and the Habsburg monarchy. In 1795, the last Polish king was forced to abdicate. The country was erased. And then in 1863, after a failed uprising, the Russian government banned the Polish language from public use entirely. Kamieński was 3 years old when that language ban came down. He grew up in a world where being Polish was a private act, not a public identity, where the nation existed in kitchens and churches and folk stories, but not on any official document or map. He left to study art against his father's wishes, trained in St. Petersburg under the Imperial Academy of Arts, had to abandon his studies when the family estate collapsed, worked as an illustrator in Warsaw to survive, and then in 1891 finally made it to Paris, to the Académie Julian, to Bouguereau's atelier. He spent years in Paris at the exact moment that European art was undergoing its most radical transformation: symbolism, Art Nouveau, the decadent movement, the fin de siècle obsession with mythology, the irrational, the erotic dark. He absorbed everything. He published illustrations in Le Monde Illustré. He exhibited. Then he went back to Warsaw in 1894. Think about that choice for a moment. He had made it to Paris. He had the connections, the training, the exposure. He went back to an occupied city in a country that didn't officially exist. And he spent the rest of his career, until 1912 when he stopped working as an illustrator, making work for Polish audiences, about Polish subjects, in a Polish tradition that the outside world wasn't looking at. Topielica is one of the things he made. He took everything Bouguereau taught him about how to paint a human body with reverence and technical care, and he applied it to a creature from Polish folk mythology that the Paris salon would have found incomprehensible. A drowned woman from a village on the Warta River, held by an octopus in dark water, painted in brown ink like a river that hadn't seen light in generations. That is not an accident of style. That is a fully conscious artistic decision. He knew exactly what he was doing. Young Poland, the art movement that kept a nation alive. Kamieński was working inside a movement, Młoda Polska, Young Poland, and if you haven't heard of it, that is itself part of the problem this painting is pointing at. Young Poland ran from roughly 1890 to 1918, the year Poland finally regained its independence after 123 years of non-existence. It was a cultural movement, art, literature, poetry, music, decorative design, that emerged as a deliberate rejection of what the previous generation of Polish intellectuals had done. That previous generation, the positivists, had argued that resistance should be practical, build schools, educate children, strengthen the economy, work within the systems of the occupying empires while quietly preserving Polish identity. Young Poland looked at this approach and said, "Not enough." Young Poland turned toward the irrational, the mythological, the deeply interior, symbolism, neo-romanticism, folk tradition. The argument underneath the aesthetics was this: If you cannot preserve a nation through politics or territory or language in the public square, you preserve it through the things that cannot be confiscated. You preserve it through the stories you tell at night, through the creatures your grandmothers warned you about, through the mythology that requires no state to survive because it lives in the bodies of the people who carry it. The Topielica is not an international symbol. She doesn't exist in Western European folklore. She is not Ophelia, not an Undine, not a Lorelei. She belongs to specific rivers in specific Polish villages. She belongs to specific girls whose names have been forgotten. By painting her in 1900, Kamieński was doing something that the young Poland artists did over and over. He was asserting the existence of a culture through its own stories, told in its own terms, at a moment when the official world wanted that culture to disappear. The painting is in the art museum in Łódź. It never left Poland. It has never toured internationally in any significant way. Most English-language surveys of fin de siècle art do not mention it, and I think that's worth sitting with. The fact that a painting this layered, this technically accomplished, this full of meaning, has been essentially invisible to the Western art world for 125 years. That invisibility is a small continuation of the same erasure the painting is pushing back against. The Drowned Woman. In 1900 European art. And how Kamieński broke the pattern. Here is something I did not expect to find when I started researching this, but that I think changes how you read the painting entirely. The drowned or drowning woman was one of the most popular subjects in late 19th century European art. Millet painted Ophelia in 1852. A woman floating in a river, serene, surrounded by flowers, dying while singing. It was one of the defining images of pre-Raphaelite art, and it spawned imitators for decades. Waterhouse painted water women obsessively. The Lorelei, the Undine, the Nixie, the Siren, all variations on the woman in or near water archetype, were everywhere in the art and literature of the 1880s and 1890s. The dominant visual tradition in all of these images did something very specific. It aestheticized the drowning woman, made her beautiful in her death, passive, available to be looked at and mourned and admired. Ophelia doesn't struggle against the current. She floats in it, singing, her face turned upward, her dress spread around her like a garment arranged for a portrait. The woman who drowns in this tradition is a beautiful object of tragedy. She doesn't act. She is acted upon, and then she is still. The Topielica is the complete inversion of this. In Polish folklore, the drowned woman is not still. She is not passive. She is not available to be mourned and left behind. She comes back. She acts. The grief that killed her does not terminate with her death. It accumulates. It persists. It reaches outward and demands acknowledgement. And crucially, the mythology does not frame her return as evil. It frames it as the logical consequence of a wrong that was never addressed. What Kamieński does in this painting is hold the tension between both traditions simultaneously. His woman is still, eyes closed, body at rest, which places her in the visual tradition of the Ophelia paintings, the aestheticized female corpse. But he titles it Topielica, and any Polish viewer in 1900 knew exactly what that word meant. They knew she was not staying still. The stillness is temporary. The octopus is holding her now, in this moment before she rises. He painted her at the threshold between victim and force. That is a much more complicated, much less comfortable image than anything in the Ophelia tradition. And I think that discomfort is precisely the point. What the octopus was doing. In European visual culture, in 1900, I want to spend a moment on the octopus specifically, because it is doing more work in this image than most people realize. By 1900, the octopus had accumulated significant symbolic weight in Western visual culture that had nothing to do with sea creatures. Political cartoonists used it constantly, tentacles reaching in multiple directions, gripping institutions, impossible to dislodge from any single point because it always had 7 other points of purchase. The octopus as symbol meant entrapment, domination, something you cannot fight because you cannot find its center. Standard Oil as an octopus was a famous American cartoon image from this exact period. Tsarist Russia as an octopus gripping the Slavic nations appeared in European papers in 1905. A Polish artist in 1900 painting an octopus wrapped around a drowned Polish woman would have had access to all of that symbolism. I am not saying Kamieński intended a direct political allegory. I don't think he did. And I think that reading is too reductive. But I am saying that the octopus was not a neutral image. It carried associations. And he chose it anyway and painted it not as a predator but as something that holds. There is also a second reference I think is worth naming. Hokusai's Dream of the Fisherman's Wife, created in 1814, had circulated in Western Europe through the second half of the 19th century and become one of the most discussed images of the fin de siècle. It depicted a female diver and an octopus in an explicitly erotic configuration. By 1900, that image had been absorbed, referenced, responded to by European artists across the symbolist and decadent movements. Kamieński knew it. He almost certainly had seen reproductions or discussed it in Paris. His choice was to invert it entirely. Hokusai's woman is alive, and the interaction is charged with desire. Kamieński's woman is dead, and the interaction is charged with nothing. The octopus is unconscious, mechanical, without intention or feeling. He took the most charged available image of a woman and an octopus and drained it of all its charge. What remained was something stranger and more affecting than either the political symbol or the erotic image. A creature that holds without knowing why it holds, a mourner that doesn't know it's mourning. Why this painting has survived, and what it's still saying. I want to be honest about something. When I started researching this, I thought it was going to be a relatively contained story. A lesser-known painting, some folklore context, some art history. I did not expect it to open up the way it did. What I found is that Topielica sits at the intersection of about 5 different things that are each individually fascinating and collectively produce an image that is genuinely harder to shake than its surface appearance suggests. You have the folklore tradition, the Topielica myth, its specific moral logic, the way it encodes a story about women wronged by men into a supernatural figure. You have Kamieński's biography, the occupied country, the Paris training, the deliberate return to Warsaw. You have the Young Poland movement, and its project of cultural survival through mythology and art. You have the fin de siècle tradition of drowned women, and Kamieński's precise, deliberate divergence from that tradition. And you have the octopus, carrying its political weight and its erotic reference, stripped of both and left as something else entirely. All of that is in the painting, in the brown water, in the closed eyes, in the tentacles that hold. What I keep coming back to is the specific choice Kamieński made about timing. He did not paint the Topielica at her most fearsome. Not the pale figure at the riverbank. Not the man being dragged under. Not the transformation complete. He painted the moment before. The girl still in the water. The wrong still fresh. The demon still forming. There is a girl from a village on the Warta River. No one remembers her name. The legend says she threw herself in after a man left her. That part of the story is always the beginning. The fiancé is always the beginning, and Kamieński painted the part that comes after the beginning and before the ending. The terrible middle, where she is neither alive nor fully what she will become, where the octopus holds her because nothing else will, where the water is the color of every river in Poland that has kept a secret it was never asked to keep. Nobody talks about this painting. That's been the point all along.